He became a billionaire, but never knew the woman who built his life was sleeping on a cold bench. When Daniel returned home, he expected love, comfort, and the life he had worked so hard for. Instead, under a dim yellow light behind a community kitchen, he saw his pregnant wife, homeless, starving, and still sharing her only meal with a stranger's child. In that moment, everything he believed shattered. Because the truth wasn't just painful, it was unforgivable. He had won everything, but lost the only person who mattered. The black SUV rolled slowly to a stop at the end of a narrow alley tucked behind a community kitchen on the south side of Chicago. The engine went quiet, but the city didn't. Somewhere nearby, a bus hissed as it pulled away from a curb. A distant siren cut through the night, fading into the cold air. But the alley smelled faintly of damp concrete, old cardboard, and something fried hours ago. Daniel Carter sat still for a moment, his hand resting on the steering wheel. The leather felt warm beneath his palm, expensive, polished, nothing like the world outside his window. He had returned to Chicago just hours ago after years away, years that had changed everything, or so he thought. He stepped out of the car, his shoes touching the uneven pavement with a soft crunch. The chill hit him immediately, sharper than he remembered. Chicago winters had a way of finding their way through in the finest coats, slipping under layers, settling into your bones. He pulled his coat tighter and looked around. The alley stretched long and dim, lit only by a flickering yellow streetlight mounted crookedly on a brick wall. Shadows pooled in the corners, while a stack of plastic crates leaned against a dumpster. The back door of the community kitchen stood slightly open, a thin strip of warm light spilling onto the ground. And then he saw her. At first it was just a shape, a figure curled on a cold plastic bench near the wall, half hidden in shadow. A thin blanket draped over her legs. A small bag rested at her feet. Beside her, a child, no more than 4 or 5 years old, was curled against her side, clutching her arm like it was the only safe place left in the world. Daniel took a step forward, then another. Something about the way she held the child, protective, instinctive, stirred something deep in his chest. The child shifted slightly, and the woman adjusted the blanket without even opening her eyes, her hand moving gently over the child's head. Careful, soft, familiar. Daniel frowned, and his heartbeat beginning to pick up. He couldn't see her face clearly yet. The light wasn't strong enough, but there was something in the curve of her shoulders, the way her head tilted slightly as she rested against the wall. No, it couldn't be. He took another step, the sound of his shoes echoing softly in the alley. The woman stirred. Slowly, she opened her eyes. For a brief second, she looked confused, like someone pulled out of a dream too quickly. Her gaze moved across the alley, unfocused at first, then settling on him. And then everything stopped. The world, the noise, the cold, it all dropped away in an instant. Emily? The name slipped out of Daniel's mouth before he even realized he was speaking. Her eyes widened, not in fear, not in surprise, but in recognition. Emily Carter blinked slowly, as if trying to make sure she wasn't imagining things. Her face was thinner than he remembered, her cheeks hollow, her lips dry. But her eyes, those warm, deep brown eyes, were the same. Still kind, still soft, still hers. Daniel, she whispered. His chest tightened so suddenly it felt like he couldn't breathe. This wasn't possible. This wasn't supposed to be her life. Not like this. Not here. He stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking until the weak light finally revealed everything he hadn't been able to see from afar. Her coat was worn, the fabric frayed at the sleeves. Her shoes looked too thin for the cold. Her hands, resting protectively over her stomach, were rough, dry from work, from weather, from something harder than he could understand in that moment. And then he saw it. Her belly. Round. Full. He froze, but the realization hit him in a wave so strong it left him dizzy. She was pregnant. His mind struggled to catch up, to connect the pieces, to make sense of what he was seeing. Emily. His voice cracked this time. What? What is this? The child beside her stirred again, blinking sleepily. A little boy. Not theirs. His small fingers tightened around Emily's coat as he looked up at Daniel with wide, uncertain eyes. Emily instinctively pulled the child closer, her hand gently brushing his hair. "It's okay," she murmured softly to the boy. "It's okay." Her voice. It hadn't changed. Still calm. Still soothing. Even now, even here. Daniel dropped to his knees in front of her without thinking, the cold pavement pressing through his trousers. He didn't care. He couldn't care. Not when everything inside him was unraveling. "How?" he whispered. "How are you here?" His eyes searched her face, desperate for answers, for something that made sense. "You were supposed to be safe," he said, his voice shaking. "You were with my family. I was sending money. He stopped himself, because suddenly, nothing he thought he knew felt real anymore. Emily looked at him quietly. There was no anger in her eyes, no accusation, just something deeper, something tired. "I'm okay," she said softly. The words hit him harder than anything else. Okay? She was sitting on a cold bench in an alley, pregnant, wearing clothes that looked like they'd been through too many winters, holding on to a child that wasn't even hers, and she was saying she was okay. Daniel shook his head, a hollow laugh escaping him, though there was nothing funny about any of this. "No," he said, more to himself than to her. "Oh, no, you're not." His hands trembled as he reached out, hesitating just before touching her, like he was afraid she might disappear if he got too close. But she didn't pull away. She never had. His fingers brushed against her arm. Cold. Too cold. He swallowed hard, his throat tight. "What did they do to you?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy and unanswered. Emily lowered her gaze for a moment, her hand still resting protectively over her belly. The child beside her shifted again, leaning into her warmth. And even now, even in this moment, she adjusted the blanket to cover him better. Still thinking of someone else. Still giving. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, pain flashing across his face. How could she still be like this, after everything, after whatever had happened to bring her here? When he opened his eyes again, and he looked at her, not as the woman sitting in front of him now, but as the woman he had left behind years ago, the woman who had believed in him, who had sacrificed for him, who had stood in an airport, smiling through tears, telling him to go chase a future that was supposed to belong to both of them. And now, he looked around the alley again, at the cracked pavement, at the dim light, at the life she was living, and something inside him broke. "I'm here now," he said quietly, his voice steadier, though his eyes betrayed everything he was feeling. "I'm not leaving again." Emily looked at him as for a long moment, as if weighing his words, as if remembering something he didn't know, as if asking herself a question he couldn't hear. Then, slowly, she gave a small, tired smile, the same smile, the one that had never needed anything in return, but the one that had carried him further than he ever deserved. But this time, it didn't feel the same. Because behind it, Daniel could see something else, something he had never seen before. A story, a long one, a painful one he had completely missed. And for the first time since stepping out of that SUV, one thought cut through everything else in his mind. What happened while I was gone? The wind picked up slightly, rustling the loose plastic near the dumpster. The streetlight flickered again. And somewhere, not too far away, the back door of the community kitchen opened. Warm light spilled into the alley. But Daniel didn't turn. He couldn't. Not when the truth he had been living without for years was sitting right in front of him. Cold, tired, still kind, still Emily, and somehow completely broken in ways he didn't yet understand. So the night stretched on around them, and the answers he was about to hear would change everything. But before the silence could break, before Emily could speak, Daniel's mind pulled him backward, back to a time when none of this existed, back to when everything was simple, back to when she smiled without that quiet weight behind her eyes. It had been a late summer evening in Chicago, years ago. The air had been warm, thick with the smell of food trucks lining the street and the hum of people finishing long workdays. Daniel had just moved into the neighborhood, chasing his first real job, carrying more ambition than money in his pockets. He remembered the first time he saw her. Emily stood behind a folding table outside a small community kitchen, handing out meals to a line of people that seemed to stretch down the block. And her hair was tied back, a loose strand falling across her face as she laughed softly at something an older man said. She wasn't dressed like someone trying to impress anyone. Just jeans, a simple t-shirt, and worn sneakers. But there was something about the way she moved, steady, kind, present, that made the rest of the street fade into the background. Daniel had paused, watching from across the sidewalk longer than he meant to. "You gonna stand there all night?" a voice beside him joked. "Or you gonna help?" He turned to see an older volunteer nodding toward the table. Daniel hesitated, then shrugged. "I guess I could help." That was how it started. He didn't know then that Emily had grown up just a few blocks away, in a house that didn't always feel like home, that she had learned early how to stretch one meal into two, was how to smile when things weren't okay, how to take care of others because no one had ever done it for her. He didn't know that she had been told more than once that she wouldn't amount to much, but he saw how she treated people. That was enough. "Hey," she had said that first night, handing him a stack of paper plates. "You knew? Is it that obvious?" Daniel had smiled. She grinned. "You're holding those plates like they might explode." He laughed, relaxing a little. "I'm Daniel." "Emily," she said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. And just like that, something shifted. They worked side by side that evening, handing out food, sharing small conversations between each person who stepped up to the table. Daniel noticed how she looked people in the eye, how she remembered names, and how she never rushed anyone, even when the line was long and the food was running low. When an elderly woman dropped her bag, Emily was already bending down to pick it up before anyone else could move. When a little boy tried to give his sandwich to his younger sister, Emily quietly slipped another one into his hands when he thought no one was looking. It wasn't for show. It wasn't for recognition. It was just who she was. Later that night, when the last tray had been cleared and the street had quieted down, they sat on the curb with paper cups of coffee that had long gone cold. "You don't get paid for this, do you?" Daniel had asked. Emily shook her head, smiling softly. "Nope." "Then why do it?" She looked down at her hands for a moment, then back at him. "Because I know what it feels like to need help," she said simply. And not get it." There was no bitterness in her voice, no anger, just truth. Daniel nodded slowly, something in his chest tightening in a way he didn't quite understand yet. "I think that's the first honest answer I've heard all week," he said. Emily laughed lightly. "Stick around. I've got more." And he did. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Daniel found himself returning to that same corner more often than he had planned. Not just for the volunteer work, but for her. For the easy way she talked, the way she listened, the way she made even the hardest days feel manageable. Their first real date wasn't anything fancy. A small diner near the bus station, the kind with flickering neon lights and a waitress who called everyone hon. They shared fries, talked about everything and nothing, and stayed long after their coffee cups were empty. He learned that Emily loved old music and rainy mornings, that she kept a notebook filled with things she wanted to do someday, even if she didn't know how she'd get there. She learned that Daniel had always been chasing something bigger, that he wanted to build something of his own, something that mattered, that he was afraid of failing, but more afraid of never trying. "You're gonna do something big," she told him one night, as they sat on the steps outside her apartment building. He looked at her, surprised. "You don't even know what I'm building yet." She shrugged. "I don't need to, I can see it." "How?" She smiled. "Because you don't quit. People who don't quit, they usually find a way." It was the kind of belief that felt bigger than either of them, and somehow it became theirs. Their life together wasn't glamorous. They lived in a small apartment near the bus line, where the walls were thin and the heater worked only when it felt like it. The kitchen was barely big enough for two people to stand in at the same time, but they made it work. Mornings were simple. Emily would wake up first, moving quietly so she wouldn't disturb him, making coffee that filled the room with a warmth that felt like home. Daniel would follow not long after, pulling on his jacket while she reminded him not to skip lunch. Evenings were better. They'd sit on the couch, sharing stories from their day. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they didn't say much at all. But there was always a sense that whatever the world threw at them, they'd face it together. That was the promise. That was the life. And for a while, it was enough. But even in those quiet, happy moments, there were shadows Daniel didn't fully see. Like the nights Emily came home later than usual, claiming she had stayed to help clean up, when in reality she had taken on extra shifts just to make sure they could keep the lights on. Like the way she would push food toward him when money was tight, insisting she wasn't hungry. Like the quiet exhaustion in her eyes that she always managed to hide behind a smile. He noticed pieces of it, but not all of it. Not enough. Because love sometimes makes you believe everything is okay, even when it isn't. One night, as rain tapped softly against the window, they sat side by side watching the city lights blur through the glass. "You ever think about leaving?" Daniel asked suddenly. Emily turned to him. "Leaving where?" "This," he said, gesturing vaguely around the apartment. "Chicago. This life. Starting somewhere else." She thought about it for a moment. "Not really," she said. "This is home." He nodded, though something restless moved behind his eyes. "What about you?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. "Sometimes," he admitted, "I feel like there's something bigger out there. Like, I'm supposed to find it." Emily studied him quietly. Then she reached over and took his hand. "Then you should go find it," she said softly. He looked at her, surprised. "Just like that?" She smiled. "Just like that." He squeezed her hand, not fully understanding what those words would one day cost her. Outside, the rain fell harder, tapping against the glass in a steady rhythm. Inside, everything still felt safe, still felt whole, still felt like something that could never break. Oh, but the truth was, it already had. They just didn't know it yet. And when it finally did, it would change everything. It didn't happen all at once. There was no single moment when everything broke. It started quietly, like most things that matter. A phone call, a pause, a look in Daniel's eyes that Emily hadn't seen before. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind where the sky turned soft orange over the rooftops and the sounds of traffic blended into a distant hum. Emily stood at the stove in their tiny kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, the steam rising gently into the dim light above. Daniel walked in, still holding his phone. He didn't speak right away. Emily noticed. She always did. "What is it?" she asked, turning slightly, her voice calm. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the small room before stopping. "Oh, I got an offer," he said. She turned fully now. "What kind of offer?" He hesitated, then exhaled slowly. "A tech startup out in California, San Francisco." The words hung in the air between them. Emily blinked. "That's big," she said softly. "It is," he replied, but there was something else in his voice, something uncertain. "They want me on their development team. It's early stage, but if it works, it could be huge." Emily set the spoon down gently. Her eyes searched his face, reading everything he wasn't saying. "What's the catch?" she asked. Daniel let out a small, humorless laugh. "It's across the country. I'd have to move. Fast." The room felt smaller suddenly. Emily glanced around. At the chipped counter, the old fridge humming in the corner, the two chairs that never quite matched. This had been their world. Oh, simple. Struggling, sometimes. But theirs. "How fast?" she asked. "A few weeks?" Silence. Outside, a car passed, its headlights briefly flashing across the wall. Emily turned back to him. "And the money?" she asked quietly. Daniel's expression shifted. "That's the problem." He sat down heavily at the small table. "They're offering a position, not relocation support. I'd have to cover everything: flight, housing deposit, first month's rent, all of it." Emily didn't say anything right away. She didn't need to. They both knew what that meant. They barely had enough to make it through the next 2 months, as it was. Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "It's not realistic," he said. "I shouldn't even be thinking about it." Emily watched him, really watched him. The way his shoulders had tensed. Oh, the way his voice had lowered. The way he looked. Smaller, somehow. Not because he lacked ambition, but because, for the first time, something he truly wanted felt just out of reach. "You want it," she said. It wasn't a question. Daniel looked up at her. "Yeah," he admitted. "I do." There it was. The truth. Simple. Clear. Emily nodded slowly. "Then you should go." The words came out steady, without hesitation. Daniel frowned. We just said, I know what we said." She walked over, sitting across from him. "You want this," she repeated. "That matters." He shook his head. "It's not that simple. We can't afford it. I'm not leaving you here to figure everything out alone." Emily reached across the table and took his hand. Her grip was warm, certain. "You're not leaving me," she said gently. "Ma, you're building something for us." Daniel studied her face, searching for doubt. There wasn't any. Only belief. "Even if it takes time," she continued. "Even if it's hard. We've done hard before." He exhaled slowly. "This is different." She smiled softly. "It's always different." For a long moment, Neither of them spoke. Then Daniel squeezed her hand. "I don't want to do this without you." Emily's smile didn't fade. "You're not," she said. And in that moment, he believed her. What he didn't see was everything she had already started calculating in her mind. That night, after Daniel had fallen asleep, Emily sat alone at the kitchen table. The apartment was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. She spread out a few sheets of paper, bills, rent, groceries, numbers that didn't add up, and her fingers traced the edges of the page slowly. Then she looked at Daniel, sleeping, peaceful, for once, and something inside her settled. "Okay," she whispered to herself. "If this is the way, I'll make it work." The next morning, she woke up earlier than usual, before the sun, before the buses started running, before the city fully came alive. She pulled on her jacket, grabbed her bag, and stepped outside into the cold. The air bit at her skin, but she didn't slow down. Her first stop was the diner down the street. "You're here early," the owner said, raising an eyebrow. "I need more hours," Emily replied simply. He studied her for a moment. "You already work evenings." "I can do mornings too." A pause, then a nod. "All right, but it's gonna be long days." "I'm used to that." From there, she went to the community kitchen. "Any extra shifts?" she asked. The coordinator hesitated. "We don't really, I'll clean," Emily said. "After hours. Whatever you need." Another pause, then a quiet agreement. By the end of the week, Emily had added a third job, helping stock shelves at a small corner store late at night. Her days blurred together. Morning shifts, afternoon at the market, evening at the kitchen, night at the store. Sleep became something she borrowed in pieces, but she never complained. Not once. Because every dollar she earned had a purpose now. Every step had direction. Some nights, after her last shift, she still stopped by the alley behind the community kitchen, the same place where she had first met Daniel. Not to rest, but to give. She'd take whatever leftover food she could gather and hand it out quietly. To the same faces. To the same tired eyes. To people who had even less than she did. One night, as she handed a sandwich to a man sitting on the curb, he looked up at her. "You always giving," he said. Emily shrugged lightly. "Someone did it for me once." The man nodded slowly. "People like you," he said, "don't stay down forever." Emily smiled, not because she believed it, but because it sounded nice. Back at home, Daniel noticed the changes. "You've been busy," he said one evening, watching her rub her hands together, trying to warm them. "Just picking up extra shifts," she replied casually. "You don't have to do that," he said. She looked at him. "I want to." He frowned slightly. "For what?" Emily hesitated for just a second, then she smiled. "For us." He accepted the answer. Because it sounded right. Because he trusted her. Because love sometimes doesn't question enough. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, quietly, the money began to grow. Hidden, carefully saved. Each dollar folded and placed in a small metal box under their bed. A secret. A sacrifice. A future. One night, as Emily counted the money again, her hands trembling slightly from exhaustion, she paused. The number was close now, closer than it had ever been. She let out a slow breath. "Almost there," she whispered. Behind her, Daniel shifted in his sleep, unaware of what she was building, of what she was giving up, of how much it was costing her. Emily closed the box gently and slid it back under the bed. Then she leaned against the wall, closing her eyes for just a moment. Her body ached. Her feet burned. Her shoulders felt heavy. But her heart was steady, because she had made a choice. And she wasn't turning back, even if it meant breaking herself to do it. The next morning, Daniel's phone rang. An unfamiliar number. He answered, frowning slightly. "Hello?" A voice came through, sharp and direct. "Daniel Carter? This is Marcus Lee from Horizon Labs. We've reviewed your profile again." Daniel sat up. Emily looked over from the kitchen. "And?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "We're still interested," the voice said, "but we'll need your decision soon." Daniel glanced at Emily. She met his eyes and gave him a small nod. A simple gesture, but it carried everything. Daniel took a breath. "I'm in," he said. So, and just like that, the path was set. Neither of them realized yet that the cost of that decision would be far greater than anything they had imagined. The weeks that followed moved fast. Too fast. Faster than either of them were ready for. The apartment that once felt full of quiet evenings and shared laughter became a place of packing lists, documents, and long nights filled with decisions that didn't leave room for second thoughts. Daniel spent his days preparing, filling out forms, answering emails, taking calls that stretched late into the night. Every step forward made the opportunity feel more real, but also more distant from the life they knew. Emily moved just as quickly, but differently. She made sure everything was ready before he even thought to ask. The documents he needed appeared neatly organized. The fees were paid without delay. His suitcase slowly filled with everything he would need for a life miles away. Daniel noticed, but not enough. Not the way he should have. "You've been handling a lot," he said one evening, watching her zip up the side pocket of his suitcase. Emily smiled lightly. "It's just paperwork." He frowned slightly. "It's more than that." She shrugged. "It'll be worth it." He studied her for a moment. "You're sure about this?" Emily looked up at him. There it was again. That question. The one that hovered between them but was never fully spoken. "Are we really doing this?" She stepped closer, adjusting the collar of his jacket. "I'm sure," she said softly. And she meant it. Even if her body felt like it was running on borrowed energy, and even if her hands trembled when she thought no one was looking. Even if there were moments, small, quiet ones, when fear crept in and whispered things she didn't want to hear. She pushed those thoughts away. Because this wasn't about fear. This was about faith. The morning of his flight came sooner than expected. The sky was pale gray, the kind of Chicago morning that felt heavy even before the day had begun. The streets were damp from a light overnight rain, and the city moved slowly, as if it knew something important was about to happen. The airport buzzed with movement. Rolling suitcases, boarding announcements echoing overhead, families hugging a little tighter than usual, people leaving, people arriving, lives shifting in every direction. Daniel and Emily stood near the departure gate, surrounded by all of it, but somehow it felt like they were the only two people in the room. Daniel adjusted the strap of his bag, glancing at the departure board, then back at Emily. "You still have time to tell me not to go," he said, half smiling. Emily laughed softly. "You'd hate me for it." He shook his head. "No, I wouldn't." She raised an eyebrow. "You would." A small silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Just real. Daniel looked at her. Really looked this time. At the way her shoulders seemed just a little more tired than usual. At the faint shadows under her eyes. At the way she held herself steady, even when the moment threatened to shake her. "You're going to be okay?" he asked quietly. Emily nodded. I've been okay before. That answer didn't fully sit right with him, but he didn't push, because part of him needed to believe it. Most needed to believe that leaving her here, even for something better, wasn't a mistake. The final boarding call echoed through the terminal. Passengers began lining up. Time had run out. Daniel stepped closer. I don't know how to thank you, he said. Emily smiled. You already did. How? She looked at him. By believing this was possible. His chest tightened slightly. I'm coming back for you, he said. I know. I mean it. I know. Her voice was steady, too steady. Daniel reached for her, pulling her into a tight embrace. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The noise, the people, the distance that was about to exist between them. It was just them, the way it had always been. I'll call you as soon as I land, he whispered. I'll be waiting, she replied. He pulled back slightly, looking at her face, and trying to memorize it, as if something inside him already knew that things were about to change in ways he couldn't control. Emily reached up and touched his cheek gently. Go, she said softly, before you change your mind. He let out a quiet breath. Then he turned, took a few steps toward the gate, stopped, turned back, and walked straight into her arms again. This time, tighter, longer. I'll make this worth it, he said. Emily closed her eyes for just a second. I know you will. And then, he was gone. She stood there as he walked away, blending into the line of passengers moving forward. She didn't move, not until he disappeared completely from view. Only then did she turn slowly and walk toward the large windows overlooking the runway. Planes moved in the distance, engines humming low and steady, and she wrapped her arms around herself, not from the cold, but from the sudden emptiness that had settled in her chest. When Daniel's plane finally lifted into the sky, rising through the gray clouds, Emily's eyes followed it until it was nothing more than a distant shape. Then, nothing. She let out a slow breath. Well, she whispered to herself, this is it. She stood there a moment longer. Then she turned and walked away. The city felt different without him. The apartment felt bigger, quieter. Every sound echoed just a little more than before. That night, Emily sat alone at the small kitchen table, the same table where they had shared meals, made plans, laughed about things that didn't matter. Now, it felt like a place holding memories that were already starting to fade. Well, she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. A message. Simple. I love you. I'll call when I land. She smiled. A real smile. Then she placed the phone down gently. Her hand moved slowly, resting against her stomach. A small gesture, almost unconscious, but it lingered there, longer than it should have. Emily stared at the table, at the empty chair across from her, at the life they had just stepped away from. You better come back, she murmured softly. Not as a demand, not as a fear, just a hope. Outside, the city moved on. Cars passed. People laughed. Life continued like nothing had changed. But inside that small apartment, everything had. And somewhere, deep down, Emily felt it. The shift, the quiet beginning of something she couldn't yet name, and something that would test her in ways she had never imagined. Something that would ask more of her than she had ever given before. She didn't know it yet. But the hardest part of her journey was only just beginning. The first night without Daniel felt longer than it should have. Emily lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside. Every sound seemed louder now. The distant traffic, footsteps in the hallway, a door closing somewhere down the building. There was no soft breathing beside her. No quiet conversation before sleep. Just space. The next morning, she packed what little she needed into a single suitcase. By noon, she stood in front of a house she had only visited a few times before, Daniel's family home. It sat in a quiet suburban neighborhood, and far from the noise and grit of the streets she knew. The houses were larger here, lawns trimmed, cars parked neatly in driveways. Everything looked put together, stable. Or at least, that was the impression. Emily adjusted the strap of her bag and walked up the front steps. Before she could knock, the door opened. Daniel's mother stood there, tall, composed, eyes that scanned without warmth. "Emily," she said, her tone neutral, "you made it." Emily offered a polite smile. "Yes, ma'am." A brief pause. Then the woman stepped aside. "Come in." The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something cooking in the kitchen. It was quiet, but not empty. A television murmured somewhere in the background. Emily stepped inside, careful not to bring the outside with her. "You'll be staying in the back room," his mother said, already turning away. "It's small, but it will do." Emily nodded. "Thank you." No reply. Just the sound of footsteps leading her down a narrow hallway. The room was exactly as described. Small. A single bed pushed against the wall. A dresser with one drawer slightly crooked. A window that looked out onto the side yard, where a fence blocked most of the view. But it was a place, and for now, that was enough. "I'll help around the house," Emily said, setting her bag down. "Whatever you need." His mother glanced at her. That would be expected. The words landed softly, but they stayed. The first few days passed quietly. Emily woke up early, just like she always had. Before anyone else, she swept the floors, wiped down counters, prepared breakfast, packed away dishes before they were even asked for. She kept her voice gentle, her movements careful, her presence small. At first, the house felt like it was simply adjusting to her. But slowly, something began to shift. It started with the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. The way his sisters looked at her, not openly hostile, but not kind either. Measuring, whispering when they thought she couldn't hear. "She's still here? How long is she staying? Daniel really left her here?" Emily ignored it, or tried to. Because she had made a promise. To Daniel, to herself, to the future they were building. One afternoon, as she folded laundry in the living room, one of his sisters, Rachel, leaned against the doorway, watching her. "You don't have to act like that," Rachel said. Emily looked up. "Like what?" "Like you belong here." The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. Emily held Rachel's gaze for a moment. Then she returned to folding the shirt in her hands. "I'm just helping," she said quietly. Rachel scoffed. "Helping doesn't make this your home." Emily didn't respond, because there was nothing she could say that would change what Rachel had already decided. That evening, Daniel called. The connection crackled slightly. The distance between them felt in every pause. "How is everything?" he asked. Emily leaned against the kitchen counter, phone pressed to her ear. "It's good," she said. "You sure?" She smiled, though he couldn't see it. "I'm okay." A silence followed. Then Daniel exhaled. "It's different here," he said. "Fast, loud, but I think I can make it work." "I know you can." "You'd like it," he added. "The buildings, the people. It's just bigger." Emily closed her eyes for a second. "I'll see it one day." "You will," he said firmly. "I'm working on it already." Her heart tightened slightly, but she kept her voice steady. "I believe you." They talked a little longer, about small things, safe things. Before the call ended, Daniel's voice softened. "I miss you." Emily looked down at her hands. "I miss you too." After the call, the house felt quieter than before. Not peaceful, just empty. Days turned into weeks, and the change became impossible to ignore. The money Daniel sent each month arrived regularly. Emily knew because she heard the excitement in the living room. He sent another transfer. "That's good. We should finally fix the kitchen cabinets. Or get a new TV." Emily would sit quietly in the background, listening or waiting. But her name was never mentioned, not once. The money passed through the house like she didn't exist. One evening, she stood at the sink washing dishes when she heard Rachel laugh behind her. "She eats like she's got her own income," Rachel said. Another voice joined in. "Maybe she thinks Daniel's money is hers." Emily's hands paused in the water, just for a second. Then she continued, slow, steady, as if she hadn't heard anything at all, because reacting would only make it worse, because silence felt safer. But silence didn't protect her. It only made her invisible. And slowly, that invisibility turned into something else, something heavier, something colder. One morning, as she prepared breakfast, Daniel's mother entered the kitchen and watched her for a moment. "You woke up late," she said, and Emily blinked. "It's 6. "That's late," the woman replied flatly. Emily lowered her gaze. "I'll start earlier tomorrow." The woman nodded once, then turned away. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shouting. It was something quieter. Something that made Emily feel like she was constantly being measured and always coming up short. That afternoon, as she walked back from the grocery store, a wave of dizziness hit her suddenly. She stopped on the sidewalk, gripping the handle of the bag tightly. The world tilted slightly, just for a moment, then steadied. "I'm fine," she whispered to herself. But the feeling lingered, a subtle shift in her body, a quiet signal she didn't fully understand yet. That night, she sat on the edge of the bed in her small room. The house was silent. Her hand rested unconsciously against her stomach, but still flat, still unchanged. But something felt different. She let out a slow breath. "Just tired," she murmured, because that was easier. Easier than asking questions she wasn't ready to answer. Easier than facing the possibility that something bigger was happening. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, brushing against the side of the house. Emily lay down, pulling the thin blanket over herself. Her body ached, her mind raced, and somewhere deep inside, a quiet unease began to grow, not loud enough to name, not strong enough to stop her, but present, waiting. Because this house, this place that was supposed to be safe, was slowly becoming something else, something colder, something that didn't belong to her, something that never had. And Emily was starting to realize she wasn't just a guest here. No, she was an outsider, in a place that would never accept her. And she had no idea yet how far that would go. At first, Emily tried to convince herself that things would settle, that maybe it was just tension, adjustment, misunderstanding. But days turned into weeks, and the air inside the house didn't soften. It hardened. The small comments became sharper. The silence became louder, and the space she occupied grew smaller. Every morning, Emily woke before sunrise. The house was always cold at that hour, the kind of cold that settled into your hands as you turned on the faucet. She would wrap her sweater tighter around her shoulders and begin her routine. Sweep the floors, wash the dishes, prepare breakfast. All before anyone else stepped into the kitchen, she moved quietly, carefully, yet as if making noise might give them another reason to notice her. But no matter how much she did, it was never enough. "You missed a spot," Daniel's mother would say, pointing at the corner of the counter. "You're too slow," Rachel would mutter as she passed by. Emily would nod, apologize, start again. Because pushing back didn't feel like an option. Because she still believed that patience would make things better. Because she didn't want to create problems Daniel couldn't fix from miles away. But patience, she was learning, didn't always lead to peace, but sometimes it just gave people more room to take. The dizziness came back more often, stronger this time. One morning, while carrying a basket of laundry down the hallway, the world tilted again. Her grip loosened. Her clothes slipped from her hands and scattered across the floor. Emily reached for the wall, steadying herself. Her breathing slowed, then returned. Rachel stood at the end of the hallway, watching. "You okay?" she asked, but there was no concern in her voice. "I'm fine," Emily replied quickly. Rachel shrugged, then cleaned that up, and walked away. Emily bent down slowly, gathering the clothes, her movements careful now. Something wasn't right. She knew that. But she didn't say it. Not yet. Later that week, the nausea began. Subtle at first, a discomfort she tried to ignore, but it grew. Until one morning, she barely made it to the sink in time. Her body shook slightly as she leaned over, gripping the edge tightly. Footsteps echoed behind her. Daniel's mother stood in the doorway. "You're sick?" she asked. Just Emily wiped her mouth, nodding faintly. "Just tired?" The woman studied her, then looked down, at her stomach. Something unreadable passed across her face. "You should see a doctor," she said. Emily hesitated. "I will." But she didn't. Not immediately. Because time was not hers anymore. Because money wasn't hers to use. Because asking for help here always came with a cost. It wasn't until a week later, after nearly collapsing at the grocery store, that she finally went. The clinic was small, crowded. The waiting room filled with people who looked just as tired as she felt. When her name was called, she stepped inside quietly. The doctor asked questions, routine, simple, then tests, more waiting. Finally, the doctor returned, a soft smile on his face. "Emily," he said gently, "you're pregnant." The word settled into the room like a slow echo. Pregnant. Emily didn't move, didn't speak. Her hand lifted slowly, resting against her stomach. There was no visible change yet, no sign from the outside, but everything inside her shifted. A life. Small. Fragile. Real. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. "Are you okay?" the doctor asked. Emily nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes." And she meant it, because for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel alone. That evening, she returned to the house with a quiet kind of hope, something soft, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She stood in the kitchen, waiting for the right moment. Daniel's mother sat at the table, flipping through a magazine. Rachel leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone, and Emily took a breath. "I have something to tell you," she said. They looked up, waiting. "I'm pregnant." Silence, but not the kind she expected. No surprise, no joy, just stillness. Rachel let out a short laugh. "Seriously?" Emily blinked. Yes. Daniel's mother closed the magazine slowly. Her expression didn't change. How far along? She asked. About 2 months. Another pause. Then the woman leaned back slightly. That's inconvenient. The word hit harder than it should have. Emily felt her chest tighten. Inconvenient? Rachel scoffed. You think we needed this right now? Emily's fingers curled slightly at her sides. It's Daniel's child, she said quietly. Daniel's mother's gaze sharpened. And Daniel is not here. The room felt colder. He would want to know, Emily added. Rachel shook her head. Of course you'd say that. Emily frowned. What does that mean? Rachel stepped closer. It means you think this changes things, that it gives you some kind of place here. Emily's voice steadied. I'm not asking for anything. No, Rachel replied. You're expecting it. The tension snapped, not loudly, but completely. That night, dinner was quiet. Too quiet. No one spoke to her. No one asked how she felt. No one acknowledged what she had shared. Emily sat at the edge of the table, her appetite gone. Her hand rested lightly on her stomach. A silent promise. I'll protect you, no matter what. She didn't know how soon she would be tested on that. It happened just days later. The sky had turned dark early that evening, heavy clouds rolling in, the air thick with the promise of rain. Emily returned from the store, her steps slower now, her body heavier with each passing day. She entered the house quietly, set her bag down, walked toward the kitchen. There was food on the stove. Not much, but enough. She reached for a plate. Don't touch that. The voice cut through the room. Emily froze. Daniel's mother stood in the doorway, her expression hard. That food isn't for you. Emily turned slowly. I haven't eaten all day, she said. That's not my problem. Rachel appeared behind her. She eats like she owns the place, she muttered. Emily's voice trembled slightly. I'm pregnant. And? The older woman replied flatly. Emily stared at her. And it's your son's child. The silence that followed was sharp, cold, final. Daniel's mother stepped forward. You think that gives you rights? She said. I'm not asking for rights, Emily whispered. Just basic care. Rachel laughed. You should have thought about that before. Emily's chest tightened. I didn't do anything wrong. No, the woman replied. You just became a burden. The word landed, heavy, unavoidable, and in that moment, something broke. Not loudly, not visibly, but completely. Daniel's mother turned toward the hallway. Pack your things. Emily blinked. What? I said pack your things. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You're leaving. The world seemed to slow. I can't leave, Emily said. It's raining. I don't have anywhere to go. That's not my concern. Rachel moved past her, already heading toward the room. Should I help her pack? She asked casually. Yes. Emily's heart pounded. This isn't right, she said. Yet no one answered. Within minutes, her small bag was thrown onto the floor, clothes stuffed inside carelessly, her few belongings reduced to something disposable. Please, she said softly. No one stopped. No one hesitated. The door opened. Rain poured down outside, heavy and relentless. Rachel dragged the bag to the front. Time to go. Emily stood there, frozen. Her hand instinctively moved to her stomach. Protective. Desperate. I'm carrying his child, she said one last time. Daniel's mother didn't look at her. Then you should figure out how to take care of it. The door closed behind her. The sound echoed louder than the storm. Emily stood in the rain, soaked, alone. The world blurred around her as water ran down her face, mixing with tears she couldn't hold back anymore. Her bag lay at her feet, but her life reduced to what she could carry. She looked back at the house. Warm lights glowed inside. Laughter echoed faintly from the television, as if nothing had happened, as if she had never been part of it. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, around her child, and for the first time since Daniel left, she felt completely, utterly alone. The rain kept falling, and she had nowhere left to go. For a long moment, Emily didn't move. The water soaked through her clothes, ran down her face, clung to her skin like the night itself was pressing her down. Her bag sat beside her on the sidewalk, already damp, already heavy with everything she had left. Behind her, the house stood warm and quiet. In front of her, nothing. No plan, no place. Just a long, empty street stretching into darkness. Emily slowly bent down, went lifting the bag with trembling hands. Her body ached, her stomach tight with both hunger and something deeper, something protective. She placed one hand gently over her belly. "It's okay," she whispered. "We're going to be okay." The words sounded fragile, but she held on to them anyway, because she had nothing else. She began to walk. Each step felt heavier than the last, her shoes slipping slightly against the wet pavement. The rain softened as she moved farther from the neighborhood, turning from a heavy downpour into a cold drizzle. Streetlights flickered above her, casting uneven shadows along the road. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. By the time she reached the main road, her body was shaking from the cold. Cars passed by, headlights cutting through the dark, but no one stopped, but no one looked twice. Emily kept walking, until she couldn't anymore. An unfinished building stood at the corner of a quiet block, its concrete frame exposed, empty windows staring out into the night. It wasn't safe. It wasn't warm. But it was shelter. She climbed the steps slowly, her breath shallow, her body exhausted. Inside, the space echoed. Bare walls, cold floors, the sound of wind slipping through the open structure. Emily lowered herself into a corner, setting her bag beside her. For a moment, she just sat there, listening, waiting, as if something might come and tell her this wasn't real, that she could go back, that everything would be okay again. But nothing came. Only silence. She leaned back against the wall, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. "I'm here," she whispered. I'm still here." The baby didn't move. Not yet. But she felt it. A quiet presence. A reason. And slowly, despite everything, she closed her eyes. The next morning came too quickly. The gray light of dawn slipped through the open walls, waking her before she was ready. Her body felt stiff, every muscle aching from the cold floor. Emily sat up slowly, wincing slightly as her back protested. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten. Not since the day before. She stood carefully, brushing dust from her clothes, though it didn't make much difference. Everything she wore now carried the same story, worn, tired, stretched thin. Outside, the city had already started moving. Vendors setting up small stands, buses rumbling down the street, people walking with purpose. Emily stepped onto the sidewalk again, and her bag slung over her shoulder. Her eyes scanned the area, searching for anything. A small food stall caught her attention. An older woman arranging roasted corn over a metal grill, the smell drifting into the air. Emily hesitated, then walked closer. "You look tired," the woman said, not unkindly. Emily offered a faint smile. "Just didn't sleep well." The woman glanced at her stomach. "How far along?" Emily paused. "Almost 3 months." The woman nodded slowly. "That's not easy." Emily said nothing. The woman reached down, picking up a piece of corn and handing it to her. "Take it." Emily blinked. "I don't have money." The woman shook her head. "Just take it." For a moment, Emily didn't move. Then she accepted it, her fingers brushing the warm surface. "Thank you," she whispered. She sat on a nearby bench and eating slowly. Each bite felt like more than food. It felt like relief. The days that followed blurred together. Emily tried returning to the community kitchen. It was familiar, safe in a way. But things had changed. She wasn't there as a volunteer anymore. She was there because she had nowhere else to go. Still, she helped. It was instinct, habit, even when her body told her to rest. She wiped tables, carried trays, helped serve meals, and when the lines grew long, she stood there beside everyone else, offering what she could. One evening, a small boy stood in front of her, clutching an empty plate. "Is there more?" he asked quietly. Emily looked at the tray, almost empty. She hesitated. Then she took her own portion, the one she had set aside for herself, and placed it on his plate. "There you go," she said gently. The boy's eyes lit up. "Thank you." He ran off before she could respond. Emily watched him go. Her stomach tightened with hunger. But she smiled anyway, because that's who she was. Even now. Even here. Nights were harder. Some evenings, she found a bench near the bus station. Other nights, she slept behind the community kitchen, curled against the wall, her bag tucked close. The cold seeped in. The noise never fully stopped. And sometimes, the fear came with it. Footsteps in the distance. Voices she didn't recognize. Moments where she held her breath, hoping to go unnoticed. But she endured. Because she had to. Because she wasn't alone anymore. Weeks passed. Her body changed. Her belly slowly rounding. Her movements slower, more careful. The exhaustion deepened. But so did her resolve. One night, as she sat on the same cold bench behind the kitchen, she noticed someone watching her. An older man, sitting a few feet away. His clothes were worn, his face lined with years that told stories she couldn't guess. He didn't speak, just observed. After a while, he leaned forward slightly. "You always give your food away," he said. Emily glanced at him. "Not always." He nodded. "More than most." She shrugged lightly. "Some people need it more." The man studied her for a moment. "You don't look like you got much yourself." Emily smiled faintly. "I have enough." He let out a quiet breath. "That's what people like you say." A pause, then he added, "Kindness has a way of coming back around." Emily looked at him, curious. "What do you mean?" The man leaned back, and his eyes drifting toward the dim streetlight. "I mean, nothing stays lost forever." His words hung in the air. Strange, but not unwelcome. Emily nodded slowly. "I hope you're right." The man didn't respond, just watched the night. Emily pulled her jacket tighter around herself, settling back against the bench. The cold pressed in. The city hummed. And beside her, hope flickered. Small, fragile, but still alive. Because even in the darkest moments, she hadn't stopped being who she was, and somehow, that mattered, more than she understood. The nights grew colder, not just in temperature, but in feeling. The kind of cold that didn't leave when the sun came up. The kind that settled deep inside, quiet and persistent. Emily adjusted the thin blanket around the small boy sleeping beside her on the bench. And he had started showing up every evening now, always at the same time, always with the same tired eyes. He never said much, just sat close and stayed. She never asked where he came from, because she already knew, the same place she was trying not to belong to. "You should be inside," she whispered softly, brushing his hair back. The boy didn't answer. He just leaned closer. Emily pulled him gently under the blanket. Even now, she was still protecting someone else. Across from her, the old man sat in his usual spot. Same position, same silence, but his eyes missed nothing. "You keep taking in strays," he said quietly. Emily glanced up. "He's not a stray." The man nodded slightly. "No, neither are you." A faint smile touched her lips. "Oh, you always talk like that?" "Like what?" "Like everything means something more." He leaned back, folding his hands together. "That's because it usually does." Emily studied him for a moment. Up close, he didn't look like the others who passed through this alley. Yes, his clothes were worn. Yes, his beard was uneven, his hands rough. But there was something in his posture, something in the way he spoke. Measured, calm, like someone who had once lived a very different life. "You don't seem like you belong out here," she said. He chuckled softly. "Funny thing about life," he replied. "It doesn't always ask where you belong." Emily tilted her head slightly. "What happened to you?" The man didn't answer right away. His gaze drifted toward the far end of the alley, at where the dim streetlight flickered against the brick wall. "Let's just say," he said slowly, "I used to think I understood how the world worked. And now? Now I understand how people work." Emily frowned slightly. "That sounds worse." "It is," he said simply. Silence settled between them again. But this time it wasn't empty. It was thoughtful. Later that night, after the boy had fallen asleep, Emily sat quietly, her back against the cold wall, her hand resting gently on her stomach. Her body felt heavier now, each movement slower, more deliberate, but her eyes remained steady. "You didn't tell him," the old man said suddenly. Emily glanced over. "Tell who?" "The father." Her breath caught slightly. For a moment she didn't answer. Then she looked down. "No," she admitted. Why not?" She traced a small circle against her stomach. "He's trying to build something," she said. "I didn't want to add pressure." The man raised an eyebrow. "You think a child is pressure?" "No," Emily said quickly. "I think distance is." He watched her closely. "You're carrying something big," he said. "I know. And you're carrying it alone." Emily didn't respond, because there was no point denying it. The truth was already there. Clear, unavoidable. The man leaned forward slightly. "You ever think maybe he deserves to know?" Emily's voice softened. "He deserves a chance to succeed." "And you don't?" That question stayed in the air, heavy, unanswered. Emily swallowed slowly. "It's not about me." The man shook his head. "It never is with people like you." She looked at him. "Oh, what does that mean?" "It means you give everything away," he said. even the parts you should keep. Emily looked down again, her hand still resting on her stomach. Protective, instinctive. Some things are worth it, she said quietly. The man studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Yeah, he said. They are. Another pause. Then he added, almost to himself, but they're supposed to come back, too. Emily smiled faintly. You really believe that? He met her eyes. I don't believe it, he said. I've seen it. Something in his tone shifted. Subtle. But real, Emily noticed. But she didn't press. Because whatever his story was, he wasn't ready to share it. And she understood that. Better than most. The days continued to pass, each one blending into the next. Emily found small ways to survive, when helping at the kitchen for extra meals, washing dishes at nearby stalls in exchange for food. Sometimes, people gave without asking. A piece of bread, a cup of coffee, a quiet kindness. And every time it happened, Emily said thank you, every time, because she knew what it meant, what it cost, what it gave. One afternoon, as she struggled to stand after a long day, her body suddenly tightened, a sharp discomfort, not pain, but something close. She froze, her hand pressed instinctively against her stomach. Not yet, she whispered. The feeling passed, but the fear stayed. She wasn't ready. Not like this. Not here. That night, she sat beside the old man again. I think something's wrong, she admitted. He looked at her immediately. What kind of wrong? She hesitated. I don't know. He studied her carefully, then nodded. You need rest. Emily let out a small laugh. That's not really an option. It is, he said firmly. You just haven't chosen it. She shook her head. I can't stop. Why? Because if I do, everything falls apart. The man leaned back, his eyes steady. Sometimes things fall apart so something else can come together. Emily looked at him. You always talk like that? He smiled faintly. Only when it matters. She exhaled slowly, then leaned back against the wall. The cold pressed into her again. The city moved around her. And for a moment, she let herself feel it. The exhaustion, the fear, the weight of everything she was carrying. But also, something else. A quiet strength, a refusal to give up. Because no matter how hard things became, she still showed up, still gave, still cared. And somewhere deep inside, that was building something. Something she couldn't see yet. Something she didn't understand yet. But something that was already changing her life. And not just hers. The old man watched her in silence. His expression unreadable. Thoughtful. As if he knew something she didn't. As if he was waiting. For the moment. When everything would finally come back around. It began thousands of miles away, under a different sky, in a city that never seemed to slow down. San Francisco. Glass towers stretched into the clouds, reflecting sunlight in sharp angles. Streets buzzed with energy, cars moving fast, people moving faster, conversations layered over the constant hum of opportunity. Daniel Carter stood at the edge of it all. And he had made it. At least that's what it looked like. While the small startup he had joined had grown faster than anyone expected. What started as late nights and uncertain code turned into contracts, investors, expansion. And then, explosion. The kind of success that changed everything overnight. Daniel's name began appearing in rooms he had once only imagined. Boardrooms, investor meetings, tech conferences where people listened when he spoke. The apartment he first shared with 2 other engineers became a sleek, high-rise unit overlooking the bay. The long bus rides turned into quiet drives in a car that no longer rattled with every turn. His life moved forward, relentless, unstoppable, but not complete. Because every night, no matter how long the day had been, Daniel made one call. "Hey," he would say, his voice softer than it had been all day. "Hey," Emily would answer. And the connection was never perfect. Sometimes it cut in and out. Sometimes the silence between words stretched too long. But they stayed on the line, talking about small things, safe things. "How's the kitchen?" he asked once. "Still busy," she replied. "You're not working too hard, right?" Emily smiled faintly, though he couldn't see it. "I'm okay." That answer again. The same one. Every time. Daniel wanted to believe it. Needed to. Because the alternative didn't fit the picture he had built in his mind. A picture where she was safe, supported, waiting, not struggling, not alone. And slowly, that picture became his reality. Not the truth, but something easier to hold on to. Months passed. Then more. Daniel worked harder, longer, pushing himself with a focus that bordered on obsession. Well, because every dollar he earned had a purpose. Every step forward had direction. He wasn't just building something for himself. He was building something of her. At least, that's what he believed. One evening, as the city lights reflected off the glass walls of his office, Daniel sat across from one of his business partners. "You're burning yourself out," the man said. Daniel shook his head. "I'm fine. You said that last month." "I've got reasons." The man leaned back. "We all do." Daniel looked down at his phone. A message from his mother. "She's gone." His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" he typed back. A few seconds passed. Then, "She left, packed her things and left. Didn't say where." Daniel stared at the screen. The words didn't make sense. "She wouldn't do that," he replied. "She did," came the answer. "Oh, we tried to stop her." A pause. Then another message. "Some people aren't who you think they are." Daniel leaned back in his chair, his chest tightening slightly. "Emily? Leave? Without telling him?" It didn't fit. Didn't align with anything he knew about her. He called immediately. The phone rang. Once, twice. Then silence. No answer. He tried again. Nothing. A third time. Still nothing. Daniel stared at the screen. Something felt off. But the voice in his head, the one shaped by distance, by exhaustion, by everything he couldn't see, whispered something easier. Maybe she changed. Maybe the pressure got to her. Maybe... He set the phone down slowly. His partner watched him. "Everything okay?" Daniel nodded. "Yeah." But it wasn't. Not really. Still, the days continued. And Daniel did what people often do when something doesn't make sense. He moved forward. He worked harder. Buried the doubt under progress. Under success. Under everything that felt like proof he was doing the right thing. The company grew. Investments multiplied. His name became attached to something bigger than he had ever imagined. And one day, someone called him what he had once only dreamed of. Billionaire. The word sounded strange, heavy, unreal. Daniel stood in front of a large window overlooking the city, the skyline stretching endlessly before him. He should have felt something. Pride, victory, relief. Instead, there was a quiet space inside him, unfilled, unanswered. That night he called again, out of habit, out of hope. The line didn't connect. He stared at the screen for a long time, then set the phone down. Weeks passed, then months, and slowly, the calls stopped. Not all at once, but gradually, like something fading, like a voice growing distant, until it was gone. And with it, a part of him he didn't fully understand. Back in Chicago, the story was different, but Daniel didn't see it, didn't hear it, didn't know, because the truth had been replaced, carefully, quietly, by something easier to believe. And that lie became the foundation of everything he built, until the day he came back, the day the truth finally found him. Not in a boardroom, not in a meeting, but in a quiet market street, where a woman looked at him with something he couldn't ignore. "You didn't know?" she asked. "Know what?" Daniel replied. The woman shook her head slowly. "They threw her out," she said, and his heart skipped. "What?" "She was pregnant," the woman added. The world tilted. Daniel felt the ground shift beneath him. "Pregnant?" he repeated. The woman nodded. "And she had nowhere to go." Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. "Where is she?" Daniel asked, his voice barely holding. The woman pointed down the street. "People see her sometimes. Around the kitchens. The bus stops." Daniel didn't wait. He ran. Through streets he once knew, past places that held memories he hadn't revisited in years. His heart pounded, his breath uneven, every step carrying something heavier than the last, because the life he thought he had built was standing on something broken, something he had never questioned, something he had never looked back to see. And now, it was all catching up, fast. No, because somewhere out there, Emily was still living the truth he had been running from. And for the first time since everything changed, Daniel wasn't moving forward. He was trying to find his way back. The city blurred around him, street after street, faces he didn't recognize, voices that meant nothing. Everything familiar now felt distant, like he was walking through a version of his life that no longer belonged to him. His car sat abandoned near the market. He didn't remember leaving it, didn't remember locking it. All he could hear was that woman's voice echoing in his mind. She was pregnant. They threw her out. Each step felt heavier than the last. His breath came faster, uneven, as if his body was trying to catch up with something his mind had already accepted. He had been wrong, terribly wrong, and now he was too late. Or maybe, not yet. The streets grew quieter as he moved farther from the main road. The bright storefronts gave way to dim alleys. Clean sidewalks turned into cracked pavement. The smell of fresh coffee faded, replaced by damp concrete and something harder to name. Daniel slowed, his eyes scanning everything now, searching, desperate. Then, he saw the sign, Community Kitchen. The same place, the same one. The one where everything had started. His chest tightened. He stepped closer, his heart pounding louder with each movement. The back door was slightly open, a warm glow spilling into the alley behind it. And that's when he saw the bench. Old. Plastic. Faded by time. And on it, a figure. Curled slightly. Still. At first he couldn't move, couldn't breathe, but because something deep inside him already knew, even before his eyes confirmed it. He took a step forward, then another. Slow. Careful. As if the moment might shatter if he moved too fast. The streetlight flickered above, casting a soft, uneven glow across the alley. And finally, he saw her, Emily, sitting on that cold bench, her body thinner than he remembered, her clothes worn, stretched from too many nights spent outside, her hair pulled back loosely, strands falling across her face, but her eyes, still the same, still kind, still warm, even now, even here. She wasn't alone. A small child slept beside her, wrapped in a thin blanket, his head resting against her shoulder. Emily's hand rested gently over him, protective, instinctive, the same way she had always been. Yes, Daniel's chest tightened so sharply it felt like it might collapse. This was real. Not a story, not a misunderstanding, not something he could fix with a phone call or a transfer. This was the truth, and it was standing right in front of him. He stepped closer. The sound of his shoe against the pavement made her stir slightly. Her eyes opened slowly, tired, heavy, but alert. For a moment, she looked confused. Then, she saw him. Everything stopped. The air, the sound, the movement. Daniel? His name left her lips like a question she wasn't sure she should ask. Daniel dropped to his knees in front of her. Right there, on the cold ground, as if standing was no longer an option. Emily? His voice broke. Oh my God! His hands trembled as he reached toward her, not touching, not yet, afraid, and afraid she might disappear, afraid this wasn't real. What happened to you? The question came out broken, incomplete, because there were no words big enough for what he was seeing. Emily looked at him quietly, not angry, not accusing, just tired. I'm okay, she said softly. The same words, the same answer. But now, he could see the truth behind them. No, Daniel whispered. No, you're not. His eyes moved slowly, taking everything in, the worn coat, the thin blanket, the small bag at her feet, and then her stomach. His breath caught. He froze, completely. Because now, there was no doubt. She was pregnant. Not just slightly, not just early, but far enough along that it could no longer be hidden. His child, growing, without him, without protection, without everything he thought he had been providing. Daniel's hand lifted slowly, shaking. He placed it gently against her stomach, and in that moment, something moved, a small shift, a kick. He gasped. Tears filled his eyes instantly. He's real, he whispered. Emily nodded. Yes. Her voice was soft, steady. But there was something behind it now, something deeper, something he hadn't heard before. Pain. Daniel lowered his head, his shoulders shaking slightly. I missed everything, he said. I wasn't here. I didn't know. Emily watched him. Her expression didn't change, because part of her already understood. He hadn't known. But that didn't erase what had happened. I called, he said, his voice tight. I kept calling, and then they told you I left, she said quietly. Daniel looked up. A shock flashed across his face. You knew? Emily gave a small, sad smile. I figured. Silence fell between them. Heavy. Unavoidable. They lied to me, Daniel said, his voice hardening now. They told me you walked away, that you didn't want this life. Emily didn't respond, because the truth didn't need defending. It was already written in everything around her, in the bench, in the cold, in the way she sat there, still giving what little she had to someone else. Daniel looked at the child beside her. "Is he yours?" he asked. Emily shook her head. "No." "Then why?" "He needed somewhere safe," she said simply. Daniel closed his eyes for a second. Even now, even after everything. She was still choosing others, still giving, still holding on to something the world had tried to take from her, while his chest tightened again. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The words felt small, too small. "I should have been here." Emily looked at him. "You are now." It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, but it wasn't rejection either. It was something in between, something fragile. Daniel reached for her hand this time. She didn't pull away. Her fingers were cold. He held them anyway. "I'm not leaving again," he said. His voice steadier now. Different. Not the same man who had walked away months ago. This one had seen the cost. Emily studied his face, as if searching for something. Then she nodded slightly. "Okay." The word was quiet, but it carried weight. Behind them, the door of the community kitchen opened. Light spilled into the alley. Voices followed. Life continued. But for Daniel, everything had already changed, was because the truth he had been missing was no longer hidden. It was here, in front of him, alive, breathing, waiting. And for the first time, he understood what it meant to lose something and still have a chance to fight for it. The drive was quiet, not because there was nothing to say, but because there was too much. Daniel kept both hands on the steering wheel, his grip firm, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. The city lights streaked past the windows, reflections sliding across the glass like fragments of a life he no longer recognized. Beside him, Emily sat still. The small boy from the alley slept in the back seat, wrapped in a blanket Daniel had taken from the car without thinking. The heater hummed softly. For the first time in months, she wasn't cold. Emily rested one hand over her stomach, the other folded in her lap. Her body felt heavy, exhausted in ways that went beyond sleep. But there was something else now, something unfamiliar. Safety, not complete, not fully trusted, but present. Daniel glanced at her briefly, then back to the road. "I bought a house, ma femme," he said after a while. Emily didn't respond immediately. "A big one," he added. "I thought, when you came to visit, or when we—" He stopped, because the words didn't fit anymore, because the life he had imagined had been built without knowing the truth. Emily looked out the window, streetlights passing one by one. "I didn't need a big house," she said quietly. Daniel swallowed. "I know." Silence returned. Not cold, not empty, just honest. The car turned into a quiet neighborhood, wide streets, clean sidewalks, and houses standing tall behind trimmed hedges and closed gates, the kind of place that looked like everything was under control. Daniel slowed as they approached a large iron gate. He pressed a button. The gate opened slowly. Emily looked up, her eyes taking in the house beyond it. It was beautiful. Too beautiful. Large windows, soft exterior lights glowing against clean white walls. A place built for comfort, for stability, for a future. Daniel pulled into the driveway and stopped the car. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he spoke. "This was supposed to be for you." Emily didn't answer, because something didn't feel right. There were lights on inside, more than just one room, movement behind the curtains. Daniel noticed it too. His brow furrowed. "That's strange," he muttered. "Strange." While he stepped out of the car slowly. Emily followed, her steps careful. The night air was still, quiet. But something underneath it was shifting. The front door opened before they reached it. Rachel stepped out first. Her face lit up. "Daniel, you're back!" But the smile faded the moment she saw his expression. Then she saw Emily, and everything changed. Behind her, Daniel's mother appeared, dressed well, calm, as if nothing had ever gone wrong, as if this house belonged to her. Daniel stopped walking. His jaw tightened. "What is this?" he asked. No one answered right away. Rachel tried to recover first. "We've been staying here," she said quickly. "It was empty and—" "Empty," Daniel repeated. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried, sharp, controlled, dangerous. "This house was never empty," he said. "Oh, it was meant for her." He gestured toward Emily. For the first time, they really looked at her. Not just at her face, but at her clothes, her condition, her stomach. The silence that followed was different now. Not dismissive, not careless, but uncomfortable. Daniel's mother stepped forward. "You don't understand." "No," Daniel cut her off. "I understand perfectly." His voice hardened. "I understand that while she was out there," he pointed back toward the street, toward everything she had endured, "you were here, living, comfortably, with my money." The words landed, heavy, final. No one denied it. No one could. Emily stood quietly beside him. She didn't speak, didn't need to, because the truth was already standing there, visible, unavoidable. Daniel took a slow breath, and then said the words that changed everything. "Everyone, get out of my house." The silence shattered. Rachel blinked. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious." His mother stepped closer. "This is your family." Daniel looked at her, and for the first time, there was no hesitation. "You threw my family out," he said. The words hit harder than anything else. Emily's breath caught slightly. Not because she expected it, but because she didn't. The shift, the line that had been crossed. Daniel wasn't the same man anymore. Not the one who avoided conflict. Not the one who trusted without question. This one had seen the truth. And he wasn't looking away. "You have 1 hour," he continued. "Pack your things." Rachel shook her head. "This is ridiculous." Daniel didn't move, didn't raise his voice, or didn't argue. He just stood there, certain, and that was enough, because they could see it now. There was no changing his mind. Not this time. Within minutes, movement filled the house. Drawers opening, footsteps rushing, voices low and tense, bags being filled, boxes dragged across the floor. Emily watched from the doorway. The same house that had never been hers now felt like something else entirely. Not victory, not revenge, just a shift, an ending. When the hour passed, Daniel opened the gate again. His mother stood at the edge of the driveway, her face tight with anger. "You'll regret this," she said. Daniel met her gaze. "No," he replied. "I regret trusting you." She said nothing more, just turned and walked away. The others followed, and just like that, they were gone. Yet the gate closed behind them with a quiet, final sound. The house fell silent. For the first time, it truly belonged to them. Daniel turned to Emily. "It's over," he said. But she didn't smile, didn't react the way he expected. Instead, she looked at him, calm, tired, and asked softly, "What about everyone else?" He frowned. "What do you mean?" Emily glanced back toward the street, toward the world she had just come from. "People like me," she said. "The ones still out there." Daniel's expression shifted, because suddenly, this wasn't just about them. It never had been. He followed her gaze, back to the city, back to the places he had stopped seeing, the people he had stopped noticing. And for the first time, he understood something deeper than success, something bigger than justice. Well, because removing his family from that house didn't fix what she had lived through, didn't erase the nights, the hunger, the cold. Emily stepped inside slowly, her hand brushing lightly against the wall, not in awe, but in quiet recognition of what had changed and what hadn't. Daniel stood in the doorway for a moment longer, looking out, thinking. Then he stepped inside too, closing the door behind him. Because now, he had something else to build, something that mattered more than everything he had done before. And this time, he wasn't going to build it alone. Morning came differently in that house, not with noise, not with tension, but with light. Soft sunlight slipped through the tall windows, stretching across the floor in quiet lines. The air felt still, almost unfamiliar in its calm. And Emily stood in the kitchen, her hands resting lightly on the counter. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't rush, didn't prepare. Just stood there. Because for the first time in months, she didn't have to survive the morning. Behind her, Daniel watched quietly. He had been awake for a while, not working, not checking emails, just watching, learning, understanding what he had missed. "You don't have to do everything," he said gently. Emily turned slightly. A small smile touched her lips. "I know." But she didn't step away, because doing things for others had never been about obligation. It had always been about who she was. Daniel stepped closer. "We're going back," he said. Emily frowned slightly. "Back where?" "The kitchen," he replied. She looked at him, confused. "The one behind the alley," he added. "Oh, where I found you." Her expression softened. "Why?" Daniel took a breath. "Because you were right." She waited. "What about everyone else?" He repeated her words from the night before. "I haven't stopped thinking about that." Emily studied him, carefully, as if trying to see if this was real. Not just guilt, not just reaction, but something deeper. "You don't have to fix everything," she said quietly. "I know," Daniel replied, "but I can do something." A pause, then, "We can." That word settled differently, not heavy, not forced, just shared. Later that day, they stood in front of the community kitchen again. The same place, the same alley, but now it looked different, because they were different. People moved in and out of the building, carrying trays, talking quietly, doing what they had always done, and helping, surviving, living. Daniel walked inside first. The coordinator looked up. "Can I help you?" Daniel nodded. "I'd like to talk." Within hours, things began to shift. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. The building, the funding, the resources. Daniel made calls, signed papers, transferred ownership, and by the end of the week, the small kitchen had become something bigger. Not just a place to eat, but a place to stay, to rest, to be seen. Emily stood in the center of it all, not as someone being helped, but as someone leading, guiding, giving direction. "You know what they need," Daniel said one evening. "No," she replied softly. "I know what it feels like." "That's more than enough." And it was, because every decision she made came from experience, from nights spent cold, from hunger, from silence, from the quiet understanding of what people needed when they had nothing left. More beds appeared, more meals, more hands willing to help. And slowly, the space changed, from survival to something closer to hope. One afternoon, as Emily organized supplies near the back entrance, she saw him again. The old man, sitting in the same place, watching. She walked over slowly. "You're still here," she said. He smiled faintly. "I go where I'm needed." Emily tilted her head. "You don't seem like someone who needs this place." He chuckled. "That's because you don't know my story." She crossed her arms lightly. "Then tell me." The man looked at her, really looked, then sighed. "I used to advise people," he said, "on money, on investments, on building things." Emily blinked. "Like a financial advisor?" He nodded. "One of the best." She frowned slightly. "What happened?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I trusted the wrong people." Emily understood that, more than she expected. "And now?" she asked. "Now I watch," he said. "And sometimes I wait." "For what?" He leaned forward slightly. "For things to come back around." Emily smiled faintly. "You really believe that?" He shook his head. "No," he said, then added, "I know it." Daniel approached from behind. "Emily," he called. She turned. The old man stood slowly, his posture different now, straighter, more certain. Daniel paused when he saw him. Recognition flickered. "You," Daniel said quietly. The old man nodded. "It's been a while." Emily looked between them. "You know each other?" Daniel's voice shifted. "He helped me," he said. "In the beginning, when I didn't know anything about managing what I was building." Emily blinked. "Wait, what?" The old man smiled slightly. "He didn't know how to keep what he created," he said. "So I taught him." Daniel exhaled. "I thought you disappeared." "I did." Emily looked at the man again, then back at Daniel, then slowly. Everything began to connect. "You were the one who helped him succeed," she said. The man nodded. "And you," he replied gently, "were the one who helped me survive." Silence. Deep. Full. Because suddenly, it all made sense. The nights, the conversations, the quiet advice, the way he had watched her, the way he had known. Kindness. Given. Returned. Multiplied. Emily's eyes filled with tears, not from pain, but from understanding. "You didn't forget me," the man said. "I never would," she replied. Daniel looked at both of them, his chest tight, his mind catching up. Everything he had built, everything he thought was his, had roots, deeper than he realized, and at the center of it was her. Always her. Weeks later, the space was full, not crowded, not chaotic, but alive. People moved with purpose, with dignity, with something they hadn't had before, a chance. Emily stood near the entrance, watching a young mother walk in with her child. She knelt slightly. "Come on in," she said warmly. "You're safe here." The words came easily, because she meant them, because she had lived the opposite. Behind her, Daniel stood quietly, watching, not as the man in charge, not as the billionaire, but as someone who had learned something far more important. "You changed everything," he said softly. Emily shook her head. "No." She looked around, at the people, at the space, at what had been built. "This was already there," she said. "We just gave it a place to grow." Daniel smiled. For the first time, it felt real. Not success, not power, but purpose. That evening, as the sun set behind the city, casting long shadows across the street, Emily stood outside for a moment. The air was warmer now, softer. She placed a hand on her stomach. The baby moved gently, alive, strong, a future. Daniel stepped beside her. "Ready?" he asked. Emily looked at him, then at the city, then back at the building behind them. And finally, she smiled. Yes. Because this time, she wasn't waiting, she wasn't surviving, but she was living. And the life ahead of her was built on something no one could take away. Not money, not status, not power, but something stronger, something lasting, something that had carried her through everything. Kindness. And as they walked forward together, it didn't just return, it multiplied. If this story touched you, leave a comment and share where you're watching from. And if you believe kindness always finds its way back, just comment 1. If you've ever been through something hard and kept going anyway, comment 0. I read every single one. And if this story stayed with you, don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might be the one that speaks directly to your heart. See you in the next one.